Man, that's such a catchy little jingle. I'm watching all of us down at the bottom just kind of bopping pre-show every time. It's the best. Anyways, welcome to CASAA Live, everyone. We see you all in chat. Hey, hello. How are all of you out there? Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us today on this lovely Saturday. It is Saturday, right? I hope so. Man, I can't. It's another day that ends in Y at this point for me. I'm like, what year is it? Is this 2019 still? Oh, if only we could go back to 2019. I don't want to go back to 2019. Anyways, let's how about some hey, how are yous? How about we start this show out? Kristin, hey, how are you?
Good. It's been a pretty busy week and lots of stuff happening this week with advocacy, that's for sure. I've been pretty on Twitter, a little crazy on Twitter. But otherwise, everything's good on the home front and everybody's healthy. And that's pretty much all I can ask for at this point.
You said some really nice things to your internet.
Oh, yeah, I was yelling at my ether.
Schmoozing the internet.
I'm just hoping I don't keep buffering today. I don't know what else to do.
Well, that's okay. If Kristin starts to freeze, me and Alex will just freeze with you. So you're not
I don't feel alone.
We'll just pause. That way you're not alone in it. Alex, hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm ready for Sunday.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's Sunday? What's tomorrow?
Not today.
Not okay. I feel that. Yeah.
No, it's been an interesting, exhausting week. I can only imagine what folks in the industry are going through. But as much as I can possibly empathize, I'm trying. And yeah, this is just a never-ending parade of bad news. And but I did catch the Jewel movie from the New York Times last night.
I haven't seen it yet.
That was interesting. In a
yawn-worthy kind of commentary on it.
No, I have more to say. Maybe we'll get into that later. I don't know.
For later. Okay. For now, just interesting.
If you want Alex's initial synopsis, CASAA tweeted his Twitter thread on it.
Yeah, I haven't read the Twitter thread yet either. See, I'm way behind you guys. I'm just.
But you were working today, so
on everything.
Been working fool.
Yeah, I'm just way behind on everything. This week has just been busy. It's like work, dad mode, sleep, work, dad mode, sleep, and that's it. That's my whole week. So I'm also really excited for tomorrow when I basically am just going to do nothing. I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to mow my lawn, and then I'm just going to achieve nothing from there. And I'm just so excited to do.
That's always my goal on Sundays too. That's my one day off a week. It seems like it. Although tomorrow I get to help my husband clean out the garage. So
for me, it's not necessarily the Lord's Day, but I fully believe in Sunday being the day of rest. That is something I take very seriously. I'm very tempted on most Sundays to just turn my phone off too. I'm like, I just want to don't even call me. Just let me put my feet up.
We need to have an unplugged day, I think.
Yeah, I try. I do. I unintentionally take unplugged days. That's the thing. Like, I just get busy doing other things that I unplug from social media and things like that unintentionally. But yeah, that's just been my week. That's my hey, how are ya? Is just busy. It's that time of year right now for like my company and everything that we do, where we're trying to push through the tail end of all the summer stuff before we get into like fall time and cleanup and prepping for winter and things like that. So it's just like, go. Yeah, it's just fun. Anyways, that's it for hey, how are yous? Are you prepped, Alex? Are you the ready?
Let's get into it.
All right, let's do the thing. All right, Alex, what do you got for us this week? What is the need to know? What is hot happening? What is going on?
Well, we put out a small call to action this week for a federal excise tax on vapor and other smoke-free tobacco and nicotine products. This is something that's been batted around for, I guess, a couple of years now, maybe 3 or 4 years. It's this idea that we should raise all tobacco taxes up to the level of what the federal government imposes on cigarettes. And in case people haven't seen this yet, you can do what I did. Just go to the CASAA page, get involved nationally, and it'll take you right there to this page. And
link is in the chat.
Yeah, just a little bit of background about this. First of all, we all found out about this getting kind of advanced through the Wall Street Journal. I think it was just the Wall Street Journal. I don't know. I'm sure other people picked up afterwards. But the committee, instead of like posting anything or going through the sort of proper channels of notifying the public that they're about to get raked over the coals, someone on the committee or a staffer or who knows released the details to a newspaper. And so that's how we found out this was getting some attention. We got a breakdown of the taxes in here. Just to scare the pants off everybody. Essentially what they're doing is doubling the federal excise tax on cigarettes from $1.01 to $2.02, and then raising everything up to meet that in whatever like accounting magic they've used to come up with equivalency here. And so this would add, well, we have a chart here. I'm not going to go through all of the prices, but for the DIYers out there, if you wanted to get that liter of 100 milligram nicotine liquid to further dilute into your delicious juices, that's going to cost you about $5,500 in tax. And then as someone else had pointed out, I mean, when you get into the 30 mil territory here, 12 milligrams, 18 milligrams, the tax is higher than the actual bottle of e-liquid. Mm-hmm. Of course, as we're seeing now, there isn't going to be not any tobacco-derived bottled liquid on the market. But this bill also applies to TFN and synthetic. It's basically anything nicotine. It doesn't matter where it comes from. This tax will apply to it. So again, another kind of like, if you thought that going synthetic was going to get around all of this stuff, you've got another thing coming. So not going to be exempt from this tax. Also adds about $1.50 to $2 to a tin of discrete single-use unit type oral tobacco products. And then we had some back and forth about how this would affect like nicotine pouches, whether or not the discrete single-use pouches applies to that, or if it's the synthetic nicotine, like liquid nicotine tax. I'm not entirely sure, but really what you need to know, the takeaway from all of this is this tax is absolutely outrageous. It's not consistent with guidance coming out of Public Health England or other experts in the tobacco control field. The 15 former presidents of SRNT, although they are suggesting that some sort of tax be applied to these safer nicotine products, it shouldn't come anywhere near the tax on cigarettes. So anyway, all of that to say, we've made all this easy for you. If you want to read the language for yourself, there's a link in here. Just scroll down to the page indicated. We got some news coverage and, of course, the pre-written, fully editable letter that you can send to your members of Congress. And we expect, I think the last I heard about this, and as far as I know, this is likely heading to the Rules Committee. This would be the next opportunity for any language to be added or taken out. And this could happen maybe within the next couple of weeks. It could happen next week. Things are heating up about this reconciliation bill, and people want to get, this massive Build Back Better thing funded. So I imagine we're going to keep hearing about this. And so the more people that can participate in this, the better. We really do have to make some noise because politicians are pulling out all the stops and funding, some of their loftier policy ideas here. and we're in the midst of a crisis, so that tends to.
Do you want to talk about it all where we're at this point with the call to action as far as participation, or?
Sure. We've had about a little over 9,000 people respond or send their messages, which is like all total, it's like 28,000 emails have been sent. That's not individual. That's, you're sending one to your senator, or two to your senators and one to your House rep. But still, that's decent, for what we see in the first couple of days of something like this. I'm just hoping that we can kind of keep that momentum going, and getting more people to participate in this means getting potentially more people dialed into CASAA and signed up to get alerts from us. So this is the consumer army that we've been building for more than 10 years now. Keep them coming. This is not
definitely one of those situations where if you've done the call to action, first and foremost, thank you. But don't stop there. Share this everywhere. Share it all over your social media. Share it in groups you're in. Share it in Discords or whatever. I know so many people who are in all these different group things. Share this in all of those. Share this. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Send it to random phone numbers. Just tell everyone that you know. Just tell everyone that you know, please fill out this call to action, send it out, and share it everywhere.
Yeah, this is what CASAA is about, you guys. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing right now. So, and you guys are CASAA, not just Alex who's making these things up or me who's getting out on social media. It's nothing if the members don't disseminate this and get it out there and get, you're sort of like the evangelists out there getting this information out and trying to get more people to do it. So that's your job as CASAA. Okay. Yeah. So
we need like door-to-door CASAA. I'm trying to like CASAA witnesses or something like that. Go door-to-door with this call to action. But seriously,
I would not recommend anyone going door-to-door right now. So we take advantage of all the digital things that we have. The other thing is, and I can just wrap up this legislative update really quick, and I'm just going to show you a picture. The Denver City Council is still contemplating a flavor ban. I know people might think that this is kind of not worth your time because of the FDA and all of that, but remember synthetic nicotine, and also FDA may approve a flavor other than tobacco. And so there's no reason to give up the fight on pushing back against flavor bans. And the next opportunity that we'll see an ordinance possibly in Denver, I believe, is October 6th. I don't know if I covered that on a previous podcast, but the earliest I'm going to put anything out about this would be this week. And even then, I'm not quite sure because we just haven't seen a draft ordinance materialize. And the two council members that held kind of, their webinars a couple weeks ago, I don't know that it actually convinced anybody that this was a great idea. So anyway, and just to add to that, I know that I'm struggling with this right now because of what's going on with FDA. And it is almost as if we're sort of in a bit of a holding pattern with, flavors and pushing back on things, but it is still worthwhile. The language and the talking points may have to be adjusted and all of that, but I just understand, this is kind of a confusing and frightening time for a lot of people, and we're in the same boat trying to figure out, how to best approach all of this stuff. So anyway, be on the lookout. There's still going to be local and state calls to action going forward. I'm sure we'll have just a bunch of them next year. And with that said,
there's one sort of good news or promising news one from legislative.
Okay. What is it?
I
like
I don't know how to pronounce it. I knew you were going to make me say this.
Like,
Mille Slack. What is it? Mille. I don't know how to pronounce it. Minnesota town who looks like they're not going to do a flavor ban.
Okay. I totally skipped over that. So thanks for bringing that up.
It is in the newsletter, but they basically, this kind of goes with what you just said, is that don't quit, because this is a town who decided not to do it. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, of course, surrounding towns weren't doing it and stuff like that. So, but again, it was because people spoke up, and you need to speak up. Don't count on other people to do it, because sometimes it's just you who shows up at these things, but that can make a huge difference if they hear from the right person. So don't give up. Don't give up.
Yep. Got to show up. Got to be heard. Nothing about us without us. I love that. It's just like one of my favorite things. All right, then. I guess that right there is going to wrap up the legislative rundown. Are you good? Are you good with that, Alex? Are you done running it down?
I'm done running it down.
All right. All right. Moving on. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Okay. Not take one, not take two, take three. All right. We do this every week. I don't know who goes first. Who goes first? Alex, do you want to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, you can go first. I like how we always decide this live. We do so much like discussion pre-show about our takes, about all these things, but the one thing we never discuss is the order. Or sometimes we do, and I miss it. And Kristin's like, Logan, we already talked about this. What are you doing?
So I'll get right into this.
Yeah, jump right into it, man.
So I don't think this isn't in our newsletter, right? This is about a specific company, and I can't avoid talking about this company. But they've published a couple of articles or press release op-eds recently. And the first one, I think, that's appropriate to sort of set the table here. This is from a company called Bidi Vapor. And this was September 15th. Bidi Vapor pushes for synthetic nicotine ban. And so I just want to make sure that we've acknowledged that this is not necessarily something we support. But, in talking about what industry's next steps are, we're going to see a lot of this. I know, a bunch of the people who watch us regularly, I'm sure, are aware of this. Synthetic nicotine is going to be used as a loophole for companies that have received marketing denial orders. And at the moment, synthetic nicotine is not something FDA regulates, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on FDA from both companies that receive marketing orders and even some companies that are aspiring to receive marketing orders that FDA either regulated as a drug or as a tobacco product. I will say that, and I don't know if this was just sort of clumsily written or not, but it seems as though this company is advocating for synthetic nicotine to be regulated as a drug. If you are a nicotine company and do intend to use synthetic nicotine in your products, I don't know that the drug and device pathway is going to be something you want to go through. If you think PMTA is difficult, try getting it passed as a drug. A lot of people don't think that's a real good thing to do. And of course, from the consumer side, we're not really all that interested in another prescription product or even an over-the-counter nicotine replacement therapy. But it would be good to have. I just don't want to see the entire market look like that. So that having been said, they had a really interesting post here. This is from KULR8.com, a local NBC station. And the thing that I've highlighted here is Patel and the Bidi Vapor team, based on numerous statements from FDA officials, had expected a deficiency letter from FDA, which would note areas the company would need to address to improve its PMTA. So this whole thing, and this is things that we've been hearing from manufacturers that have been receiving these MDOs, is that throughout this process, right? And for those who don't remember, maybe this is your first time hearing about vaping, companies have had to go through this in phases of compliance, right? You had to register all of your products. You had to do, or I think that changed. There was HPHC, harmful and potentially harmful constituents testing. Labels had to be correct. Everything had to be registered with the FDA, et cetera, et cetera. And so companies who were working toward going through PMTA were complying with these deadlines. And also in working up to finishing, submitting a PMTA, it's my understanding it was a pretty good deal of back and forth between these companies and FDA. And some of these folks got what sounded like, I guess you could probably call it a handshake kind of deal where, they're understanding that, there's parts of their applications that are deficient or incomplete, simply as a matter of not having enough time or not having the resources just yet. But getting assurances from FDA that they would, as long as they're continuing with this process and working towards getting all of the data that FDA wants to see, that they shouldn't have any problem moving forward. I don't know that FDA said, oh yeah, we're totally going to authorize this, but I think that there were some suggestions that companies would have more time, a little bit more opportunity to amend applications and so on. And then of course, without the industry got the rug pulled out from under them in this kind of under these circumstances. People went into the process believing they were going to go further and expected, as Mr. Patel and the Bidi Vapor team explain here, expected something like a deficiency letter. And this has been, I think, a lot of people's reactions to things like, the 4.5 million products that were denied because of no environmental assessment studies. Other people who maybe didn't have certain research attached with their applications, they were denied instead of getting deficiency letters. And this is something that the incumbent tobacco companies, remember, Altria has already gone through this process with IQOS. Swedish Match has gone through this process with General Snus. And so there is that back and forth. There are deficiency letters that go back, and the company has an opportunity to amend their application. I believe, actually, I don't know if there was a recent thing, and recent for me, because I've got the whole COVID time distortion thing. I don't know if this was last year or like 3 weeks ago, but I think Reynolds is still adding things to their application for Camel Snus. So this is normal. That what I just described is normal. That is, and it can take a long time. As a company, you obviously need to have the staying power. Something that others have pointed out is that, as a tobacco company, your business isn't solely coming from sales of vapor products, unlike a dedicated vapor company. So they can sustain their efforts to get through market authorization by selling other products. Ideally, they would be selling something that's smoke-free, but we know that that's not what the marketplace is made of. So all of this, of course, leading to a lot of people's accurate conclusion that tobacco companies have an unfair advantage because they can continue selling deadly cigarettes that are funding their PMTAs for vapor products, while the rest of the industry just doesn't. They're not in that product category. So all of that really to say, this is a pretty good, I think, this is essentially, a company's testimonial of going through the process. They lay out the timeline here. And I think, I'm not a consultant for the industry, but I after reading this, I sort of feel like telling people who are, getting the shaft in this process, I would say write your own op-ed about your experience. I don't know that your local media is going to publish it. This is a story that the media seems to be willfully missing. But I think more stories like this are important. I think, the broader news consuming public needs to understand that, this isn't the way that Janet Woodcock is framing this. This isn't the way that Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids are framing it. They're telling people that your products don't meet this standard, or that you didn't have enough evidence to convince the FDA that your products are appropriate. Your products are appropriate for the protection of public health. In reality, you can't afford this process, or you don't have the time to complete the studies, because of the way FDA rolled this out, and also as a result of the American Academy of Pediatrics lawsuit that bumped up the deadline. I think, I don't know if we said this last week, I'll just keep repeating it till I'm blue in the face, but had we seen a deadline in 2022, I think we would have seen a lot more and more robust applications getting further along in the process. I don't think that we would have had hundreds of companies being successful, but we would have had more than maybe the top 5 by market share. So anyway, if you are a shop owner, an e-liquid manufacturer, and you're getting screwed by this, I think it's really important that the public sees just how the process has been sort of used against you in a way, and that it's not fair. So anyway, that's my take on some things that weren't in the newsletter, and yeah.
No, that's okay. I mean, I can't put everything in the newsletter.
No. And we decided not to do it because
Right.
I don't want. I'm not here to call out this company. I'm not here to promote them or anything like that. It's mostly the substance of their op-ed here. And that's why it didn't make it in. So yeah, I'm just apologizing for occasionally springing things on you that are not in the script.
But, didn't I read, I don't know if it was in that one or another one, that there was some requirement that the FDA didn't even tell them about until after the deadline.
So yeah, and this all gets into
which is crazy. How are you supposed to have it? And that's one of the things they got rejected for. So
I think the first thing that I saw is, the standard is appropriate for the protection of public health. And how do you determine that? Well, loosely, what FDA has said is the benefit to people who smoke has to outweigh the risk to young people. This isn't what I'm about to say isn't something that made it into the news or it was public. I was at FDLI in, I think, 2018. That's the Food, Drug, and Law Institute. And it's probably the only time I will ever attend the conference. But Mitch Zeller was there, and on one of the morning panels, he literally pounded his fist on the table and said, "Give me a number. I want to know how many kids using these products is acceptable to you." Both sides have to come up with this. And it kind of, I think people were like, oh, maybe he's being a little dramatic, but it's, for real, like there is no number out there. The FDA doesn't know. They're just kind of, I think they have to kind of, stick their finger in the wind and see, where's all the political pressure coming from? How hot is it? And, what can we do about this? And so, the really egregious thing though, is what you said, is that, and just like what the Patel and the Bidi Vapor team right here is, they were sort of broadsided by this. They didn't know, and I think he even outlines, he outlines in here that there was some final guidance issued from FDA a month after the deadline.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking about. That's crazy.
How can you expect people to have a complete application if the final guidance for the application doesn't come out until a month after the deadline? Even if we're not talking about standards or this and that, like there wasn't. So anyway, yeah, it seems a lot like the independent side of the industry was set up to fail, and it absolutely did not help that the lawsuit moved up the deadline.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
I guess one of my first thoughts is like when you asked about like what is the acceptable number, what is the percentage of people who smoke that we would consider like a smoke-free society?
5%.
Isn't that like something? Doesn't World Health Organization consider it like something like 5%?
5%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's under 5%, and I don't know if I'm sure that's gotten sort of twisted into smoke-free society. I don't like to deal in absolutes like that. So to me, it's sort of the end of the smoking epidemic.
Right. That's the end game goal. Right. Is under 5% of the population.
Yes,
smoking.
And I think it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah,
as to what
some
end game goals are.
Right. End game goal for certain groups would be 0.
Yeah.
Absolute 0.
The 5% I think was a compromise.
But yeah, right. Like that's that. How many kids like we're under 5%. So
no, I think, and actually that somebody that had posted this up on Twitter, I think we're right at about 5% of, or wait, no, is it 5% of?
Is it a percentage of a percentage?
I screw this up every time. So it's like,
so 25, right at 5%, right?
No, it's like 25% of kids who vape are using the products daily. So then you kind of blow that up to like what of the total youth population, and that's right about 5%. So we're right
like
there.
3 kids.
Actually, 4.4.
Yeah, something like that.
We'll be under.
So yeah,
but I'm curious too. Like, what is that? If we can set this kind of arbitrary standard figure for a smoke-free society, whatever that entails, wouldn't it be reasonable enough to set some arbitrary figure other than 0 for what the acceptable level of youth usage would be? But instead, we're just like, no one knows.
That, and
if even one kid can be saved for 50 adults dying, that's worth it. And they've said stuff like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the other wrinkle here is, of course, what companies were finding out was actually going to be was more the studies that FDA really wanted were these randomized controlled trials and longitudinal studies, and it has to be product specific. So it's not just about that number, but whether or not your product specifically will inspire young people to take up nicotine who otherwise wouldn't have.
They clearly don't know.
Very specific, that strength, that flavor,
right,
that bottle, and that bottle size, that label and the bottle size. That specific thing has to have its own clinical trial. That's what
they clearly don't know young people.
They don't have to just in general prove.
I can tell you, when I was a teenager, it didn't matter what can of beer, what color the can was, what the percentage was, what I mean, things like that's where I'm just like, you clearly. We're protected. You don't even know young people. Like, it's absurd.
Yeah. Now, I'm not even.
Not to like what about it with alcohol. That was just kind of my.
We had a sort of a question comment of, have they actually proven a risk to youth? All the research I've seen based on cherry picked data, and I make that argument a lot because, and actually I just tweeted about it earlier, is that they haven't even quantified or qualified or whichever or either what the risk is. There's no. They say, well, we don't want kids addicted. Well, there's no real evidence that kids who don't smoke are being addicted in enough numbers to really make it a significant. I mean, I know some kids are getting hooked on just Juul and stuff like that, but they'd have to show that there's a really significant number of like daily users who are being hurt by this. And again, not just the 3 or 4 anecdotal stories, because our anecdotal stories don't count. And then it's brain damage, and that's rats. So it's like they haven't even established how does a company show evidence against risks that haven't even been proven yet, And I'm with you. I totally agree that it just seems to be a ridiculous standard, because it's like trying to prove a negative or disprove a negative. I always get confused on that one. Yeah, that's frustrating.
Yeah, I think, and we were talking about this before we came on, and I think, this is kind of a delicate space. And I think, we all certainly should take care in discussing this, and I don't want to be dismissive of parents' concerns. I think we've talked about this before on this podcast. When we talk about harm to kids, I don't think it's just it's not just brains. It's not just is there lung damage or irritation or whatever, but it's there's a social element to this. There are kids who get involved with using drugs and they start to withdraw, their grades start to flounder. I was one of those kids, and there are other things that come along with young people and not really having a very good relationship with substance use. But that having been said, you can't pin all of that on nicotine or any other drug exclusively. There are usually other things going on in someone's life that lead them to use drugs and then go on to use them habitually or in a way that you might call being addicted. And so I think, ultimately, I think we can all benefit from turning the temperature down on this a lot. I think when we're talking about investigating harms to children, there are a lot of ethical considerations that go into the research, so that it's not, I don't want to call it a barrier, but it kind of is a barrier to more critical research in this area. But yeah, I think when we talk about young people I think what's sort of happening here is the definition of harm is being broadened to include other things like failing grades, or this kid is spending instead of eating, they're spending their lunch money on nicotine or other drugs. Those are things that are, I think, contributing to harm, and we have to consider that as well.
Right, but again, like Logan said earlier, before the show, is that you have to compare that to like the other things that our teens are doing. I've seen some great charts that show how much they're binge drinking, what kind of prescription drugs they're taking, all that other kind of stuff. How does using nicotine or even being addicted to nicotine compared to becoming an alcoholic or drunk driving or even unprotected sex or whatever, So, they just don't seem to weigh those things. And like somebody just said in the comments, they're weighing the relatively mild side effects of being addicted to nicotine. Even if you get sick, or even if it gives you a headache, or even if you've got a social stigma, you've got adults who are dealing with the social stigma and death, so I
do want to interject,
because you want to have them really look at that and compare the relative risks. But you do have to walk this fine line so you don't look like a crazy person who's like, oh, who cares about teens? Or, oh, parents should just, parent, and that just the optics of that aren't good. And, because then they just think, well, all you care about is your addiction, that it's really easy to have them use that against you when you do that. So it is hard. It's this hard line to walk but I just get angry because the FDA has not shown, they haven't really they haven't like defined what it is that these companies have to, it's just a sort of broad thing of prove that our kids aren't, the other kids aren't going to use it, or they're never going to use it, and they're never going to be attracted to your product. And didn't, in this article, they said that they had like studies and stuff that said that this should not be a risk for kids being attracted to products. They changed the names of all their products. And
yeah, just to add on to what you just said, actually, I don't know that anybody really needs to be, I don't know if we need to illustrate it anymore, just how dire this situation is with FDA, but we're out of the territory where it's the small independent companies. There are big manufacturers who are having their applications denied. They spent millions of dollars on these things and did actually do a lot of this science and still got rejected for at least, I don't know if it was across the board, but we have seen releases about flavors being rejected. So it's like you said, there's no clear standard here there's no target for companies to meet here.
Yeah. And I just want to say really, really quick, our discussion pre-show, my point along those lines was really more to kind of piggyback off of Dr. Susie Gage, say why to drugs. We kind of miss that point a lot when we talk about youth use, regardless of the substance, is like Alex was talking about, what real underlying issues are going on? Why are young people using whatever substance they're turning to? It's kind of regardless of substance. What substance it is does matter to some degree. If a person is in pain or struggling with attention, things like this, whether young people are self-medicating, whether it's a social thing, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, that should be ultimately the concern. But all too often we just vilify the substance, we attack, we try to ban, whatever that may be. and we're not addressing the actual issues that are going on with our youth. We have high suicidal teen rates right now. There's so much going on for young people, and young people finding reprieve in substances and then being again further stigmatized. Things are being taken from them. They're being punished for trying to feel better or for trying to fit in or socialize or whatever that may be. And I think a lot of times we end up doing more harm than good in those situations, because, you know, we want that moral crusade of take down the drug and, you know, burn the fields and ban the thing, as opposed to really having a real conversation and trying to make some actual fundamental changes in the lives of our youth. And I think that's the bigger hurdle, because it feels like the easy way out to just ban the thing, right? The thing is bad. Let's do that. That feels so much easier to accomplish than like, let's actually help the kids.
Yeah. I mean, Rod, I popped that up just before you started talking. He says, sounds almost as if we can get all teens off of Juul and nicotine, that alone would make all of our kids perfect little angels. And I know he was being tongue in cheek, but that's the point, is they do seem to think that, and that was the blog post I was thinking of doing, is that they seem to think that everything will be fine if you just got off the nicotine, because they refuse to acknowledge the benefits. We don't get any benefits, you know, maybe pleasure. I saw somebody post, one guy who was trying to be on our side, but he was like, you know, well, they smoke for the pleasure. And personally, I think it's disgusting. And I was like, ugh. But yeah. And I just, Skip wants to say a couple little things to you. Like, she's glad that you brought this up. So I'll put those up as we move on to Logan. Why don't you go next?
All right. My take is going to be pretty short and sweet. I still got to pull it up here. I'm going to remove Alex's thing. Look at me in control over here in the back end. Nobody can see what's going on, but I'm doing things. Except my computer's going to be slow. I promise we'll get there. We'll get there, you guys. We're going to talk about stuff. Oh, did I freeze?
It's okay. You'll be back.
Well, I can hear. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
I just broke my computer.
StreamYard's been doing weird stuff to mine too.
So I think Kristin's internet has infected my internet. This is a
wait.
virus, and it's spreading.
That's not fair.
You're back.
You're back.
Am I?
Yep.
Yep.
You're moving.
Okay, well, my computer's still kind of froze. Hey, how's it going? This is awesome right now. Okay, here we go. I think I've got it all figured out. Man, it's just, I don't know what I did, but I'm never going to do it again. All right, here we go. We're getting there. David Sweanor. Swedish Match deserves as much credit as Volvo for saving lives. This is an article out of Snus Forumet. It's published just the other day here, yesterday, September 17th, 2021. I'm not going to go through this whole article, but there are a few key points that I want to point out, and then kind of we can have a quick little discussion about it. Earlier this week, Swedish Match announced its plans to sell off its remaining cigar business. The move, expected to be completed in late 2022, would make the company the world's first major smoke-free tobacco company. Yes, while many tobacco harm advocates applauded the move, at least one leading voice in international tobacco policy is uncertain it will silence critics of the Stockholm-based manufacturer of Swedish-style snus and nicotine pouches. Quote, I don't think the move out of combustibles will end the attacks on Swedish Match, because the attacks have long been moralistic, irrational, and decidedly counterproductive, says David Sweanor. He goes on down here to say it showed a clear way forward in tackling the horrendous toll from smoking, one that empowered consumers rather than using coercion to try to change behavior, one that created existential legal threats for big tobacco if those companies continued to focus on selling lethal cigarettes. So this article goes on to kind of talk about Volvo and the auto industry, auto harm reduction, making vehicles safer, and then comparing that to, tobacco harm reduction and companies like Swedish Match moving out of, or specifically Swedish Match moving out of the combustible tobacco arena. This is in our blog post if you want to find that, or can we drop that in chat as well? Kristin, yep. Awesome. But yeah, this is one of those things, like, is this, David goes on to talk about, like, if this isn't going to be enough to silence critics. And I agree. I think we kind of all agree there that this is a moral crusade. This is not a scientific one. This is not, there's a big difference between the auto industry making safer cars, and like Alex pointed out, cars in our society we've deemed necessary. They are a part of our daily lives. So they're applauded when we make everybody's daily life safer and better. But when you have, tobacco, for example, when tobacco becomes safer, not everyone uses tobacco. We don't deem it a necessity in our lives, so we can still vilify it. This is still a moral crusade, and that's not quite enough. Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts? Alex, you are a snoozer. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I enjoy the snooze. I will say I agree. I agree with David Sweanor's comment there that this is probably not going to be enough. I will reserve my comments for our deep dive because I think that's going to get into it. So,
ooh, okay.
Kristin? I saw kind of a tie in there too. I wonder if we're thinking the same thing.
Maybe I should have gone last. That would have been a good segue. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I agree. We saw it a lot in the early days because we use Snus a lot, not use Snus, but as an example, my husband was using it, but it was a good barometer, a good example of a low harm product that was pretty much proven with like 30 years of evidence. And it was
70s
still,
in Sweden.
Yeah. And it was still banned and just literally sorry, I said literally, but there was no harms that they can find, no cancer, there was one little pancreas study that was kind of opposed by another little pancreas study. So they kind of balance each other out to null, but they've never found any elevated risk of any disease. And that pretty much is what you define as being safe in our society. And yet it's still banned while cigarettes are still available all across the EU. And that was one of the things that they said, that you have to let us keep our snus, otherwise we're not going to join the EU. But looking at that and looking at how the ants would still lie about it and still say, well, that causes mouth cancer and that causes pancreatic cancer and that it was still banned. And, and people were, and that was where the first 99%, because originally we said like 99% safer than smoking because we were basing it on snus, and because once you take the smoke away. And so, yeah, they're a very good example of seeing how they are treated, to see that we'd still face stuff. Even if we had 30 years of science proving that we're safer, there's still going to be these people coming at us, and our job's never going to be done, I think. Yeah. In a way,
after 30 years, it's we're going to need.
Yeah, and they just wouldn't give it up. They're still doing it. So yeah, it's that, and David Sweanor, you read that article, you guys, and follow him, and he knows what he's talking about, and that's one of the reasons why CASAA is behind snus as well as vaping, because it's another very, very proven low harm, and that just goes to show you that not all tobacco is equally harmful. But some people still think, well, that's tobacco, so that's still worse than vaping. No, it's not. So yeah.
My final take is really just this right here. This kind of sums up a lot of things, right? Like, the attacks have long been moralistic, irrational, and decidedly counterproductive. Even if you as a company move out of the combustible arena into vastly safer products, this is not a scientific debate. We've talked about this in our shows in the past, that we're past the point of this being really a scientific debate. We're well in this is a moral debate. This is a moral crusade. So
yeah.
All right, that's it for my take.
Okay, let me pull mine up here.
Kristin, hey, how are you? No, I'm just kidding.
All right. I am just going to pull up. I just wanted to really quick pull up the handy dandy CASAA website, beautiful website that Danielle designed for us. And now my computer's going really slow. So up here you see blog. Click on the blog, and you're going to see all of our current and past posts, hopefully quicker than my computer's pulling it up. And this is a beautiful graphic. I just want to point out that Danielle designed as well, and you guys should check that out because it's really powerful. I thought it was really powerful. Okay, so mine, I'm talking about why is this going so slow? Holy cow. That's the one I want, but now I'm waiting for the tweet to come up. Georgia State School of Public Health put out this tweet that got stop. Jeez Louise. That got my attention because it asked, are e-cigarettes a safer alternative to traditional tobacco products? Check out the research initiative by Georgia State's School of Public Health on the harmful effects Notice how they kind of answer their own question right there. It's like, no, they're harmful, but they didn't say whether or not they're safer. And so I went in there and I checked it out. And again, this is one that's they're going to be working on. They don't have any results yet at this point, but it was just another one of these examples. And I seem to bring these up every week, and you guys are just going to start thinking I'm repeating myself. But if they would stop doing this, I wouldn't have to keep saying this. Again, waiting for my computer. Come on, laptop. There you go. But when you read this article, it essentially just says we have started, this first sentence here, they're working with Chemical Insights Institute of Underwriters Laboratories, have started a research initiative on the harmful effects of electronic nicotine delivery system known as vaping e-cigarettes. The research collaboration will characterize airborne particulate aerosols and volatile organic chemicals released during e-cigarette use and determine human exposure levels and toxicity for users and bystanders. And then it talks about the focus on public health. Our findings will identify the specific particles that infiltrate the lungs. There's not one mention. Of course, they talk about how youth use has increased, even though it's gone down in 2020. And talk about the perception that ends are a safer alternative to cigarettes and traditional tobacco products. However, a series of studies have proven that the pulmonary toxicity in e-cigarettes and a link to the negative impacts on adolescents' respiratory health. So essentially, the whole study is going to be well, let's nitpick every little single chemical that we can find. How do I go back? Let's nitpick every single little chemical that we can find in e-cigarettes. Not a single mention, unlike in the tweet, of the difference. Are they safer? They're not even looking to see if it's safer. So it's being misrepresented, and you can really see that anti-vaping bias. They're just looking for whatever they can. I mean, that's the way it reads. Now we're going to have to wait to see the actual study, of course. But my spidey sense starts to tingle when I see stuff like that. And I said, this is not going to be a good study, which is ironic because there is some good stuff coming out of Georgia State, right, Alex? I mean, that's the same school, isn't it?
Yeah, different department.
Right.
Econ professor Mike Pesco actually penned, worked with other folks to do a study directly related to this tax that we have a call to action for right now. I don't know if I linked his research in our call to action, but different department.
So I don't want to I'm not dissing Georgia State or anything because I want to stay on his good side. But the guys in the public health department need to really think what they're doing. I mean, it just frustrates me. My take on this is it just is so frustrating, and it's just so blatant these days that yes, you get all these studies are showing. Well, that's all they're looking for. They're not trying to compare it, and to me, that tweet was so disingenuous because they're trying to come off as being, we're looking at the differences. Are they safer? You aren't answering that question because they're going to come out and say, well, they're not safer because they contain this, this, and this, and this. Now, we didn't compare them to cigarettes to see if they actually were safer. We're just going to say that they're not safer because they contain this, this, and this. And that's what they've been doing this entire time from the day the FDA came out with the trace amounts of carcinogens that they found in those 5 or 10 carts that they looked at back in 2009, I think it was, or 2010, way back in the day when they had that come up. So my take is you need to watch these things. You need to read them. They may sound like they'd be good, but they're not. Always read the studies and look at them closer because you just never know what they're going to go. So I'm going to be watching this one real close, and I'll let you know how it comes out. And that's my take.
Yeah, e-cigarettes were created, designed, innovated, marketed. Well, marketed, I guess, is not the right word there, but to be an alternative to smoking, not an alternative to air.
Right. Right.
Although some days I vape enough that it's basically an alternative to air.
It is your air. Yeah.
All right. I guess that's it for our takes. And we can trudge forth. Are you ready to trudge, Alex?
Trudge. We got a half hour before.
All right, kick it. Did that even play, or did my computer just like?
It did play.
Okay, good. It was just my end.
I know, that's what happened.
I sat here and I was like, "What's happening?" Sorry, I'm still blaming Kristin's internet infected mine. And anyways,
so before we get into this, I will say I am out of here abruptly at 6 o'clock. I cannot stay a minute longer, so I'm gonna. If I disappear, it's because I gotta
30
go.
minutes. I don't know how to.
And we'll try to get all of this in. So today we're going to be talking about the Truth Initiative, everybody's favorite orange organization. I don't know if that's really showing up in here well that people can read this. Oh,
you might want to pull up the actual statement. Do you need the link?
No, I've got it. I got it queued up, but I want to rely on my Twitter screed. So
there you go. Use it as your notes.
So anyway, you've got the visual aid here. Here's the screen cap of part of what they've written. And the statement here is, of course, addressing their view of what tobacco harm reduction is. And I just want to point out that it didn't take them very long to make us all the problem. What role harm reduction should play for smokers who have rejected FDA-approved cessation methods or who find those alternatives unattractive. I don't know, I can't really speak for everyone, but most of the people I've talked to who have switched to vapor products or other smoke-free products actually did try NRT and other strategies for a while and for multiple tries, which, by the way, is the best advice that the CDC can give you other than try these approved methods for quitting smoking. Is you can expect to try and fail upwards of a dozen times before you're actually successful. So unlike how Truth Initiative is characterizing our efforts to quit smoking, we have actually tried these products and didn't find them all that effective, enjoyable, and some of us endured side effects, which I've noted in my tweet: bleeding gums, sore jaws, and heartburn. I went through that for 3 years on nicotine gum and just sucked it up because I couldn't smoke in my apartment, didn't want to have to go downstairs to smoke a cigarette. The beneficial side of this is that I cut down to a pack a day. Anyway, all of that to say, this first sentence pretty much sets the tone for the rest of their screed about tobacco harm reduction. So I know, Logan, you've had a lot of things going on, but either of you, did you guys go through this? And I'm going to be honest with you, I've skimmed that statement, their whole release, but I have not picked it apart with a fine-tooth comb. So I am here for you, sir. I am here for this.
Just the idea that we rejected them. I mean, that whole tone of that, it's like trying to portray us as just being stubborn children who, I'm not going to eat that. I mean, yeah. We rejected it. It's like, no, it didn't work for us. And then I think the other term, I'm trying to find it bigger in my
and I just want to say, like, nicotine gum, the lozenges, everything that I tried did absolute zero for me. Did nothing for me in any shape or form. I would make it about 2 minutes into a piece of gum before I just had to smoke, and I would smoke with the piece of gum in. I would smoke with a lozenge in because it wasn't enough. It wasn't effective. It did nothing for me.
They do go on to say later on that they they recognize there are a significant number of adult smokers who have rejected current cessation therapies or who simply do not desire to quit nicotine. For that group, complete transition to the least harmful nicotine delivery alternative is a desirable and appropriate result. However, with the goal of harm reduction is not to sustain a commercial market. Well, you're going to get into that statement later. But it was, and I can't find the other one. Can you read that statement to me again? What they said, the rejected one, because I'm not finding it in the. This is a long document.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have it queued up, and I'm not.
The one that you just read.
Oh, okay. So there is a contentious and ongoing debate regarding what role the concept of harm reduction should play for smokers who have rejected FDA-approved cessation methods or who find those alternatives unattractive.
Oh, it's the friggin' first sentence.
Concept. They even take it down there. Concept of harm reduction is if it's not a very real thing. Is this,
the concept
of harm reduction is not already a part of our society and functioning as we speak. It's just a concept.
You know, the thing about this is that they do get into that a little bit, but they have a very specific view of harm reduction, and it's this sort of, you know, it's supervised. It is they don't go as far as prescription, but it is something that is very tightly monitored, and they go on.
I did read the part where they note HIV and AIDS, they note intravenous drug use. They actually even, and I don't want to applaud them here, but there is a mention of needle exchange programs, safe consumption sites, things like that in that release. But yeah, you know, there's a very predominant tone, condescending tone to a lot of this towards people who smoke.
Yeah, I kind of tweeted about that too. But what I was going to say about that one line is, or who find them unattractive. Like we're just capriciously swiping left, you know, like they're unattractive. No, I mean, this has nothing to do with the attractive. I mean, just their complete lack of understanding of what makes people who smoke and use nicotine tick. It just,
yeah. So, and you know, to something that you were touching on Logan and you know, generally keeping with the theme of this horrible piece of writing, is this generally the idea that even we can't be trusted with this stuff, and they lay out here sort of the criteria under which someone could purchase a vapor product. So this would be in an adult-only retail space. Of course, no online sales, which we've pretty much gone down the path of taking care of that. But the one that stuck out to me is strict ID check requirements similar to those used for pseudoephedrine. I haven't bought, you know, as it turns out, I quit smoking and I haven't had to buy cough syrup in a long time. So I don't know what the regulations are for buying pseudoephedrine. And as it turns out, you need to show a government issue photo ID, and you need to sign a logbook.
So you can only purchase X amount in X given time.
Yeah, so they have volume of purchase limitations on here. No self-service sales, no in-store / window promotional signage near schools. Okay, but yeah, you know, they're making these recommendations for the verifiably safer nicotine products. Meanwhile, you can go to the gas station and buy a pack of cigarettes. You don't have to sign a logbook. You don't have to worry. I mean, there are, I think, limits on how many cigarettes or cartons of cigarettes you can buy, but you know, it's always going to be there. You can just go buy it, and you don't have to go through these hoops. You don't have to track down a specialty store. Just the same place that you buy your sugary beverages and gasoline, you can pick up your cigarettes. Yeah, just more. You know, this is such an agenda-laden, tone-deaf statement from Truth Initiative. It's very on brand.
Yeah, yes, it is.
So, I guess I don't quite know where to go with this. I'm not trying to get Twitter followers or likes or anything, but you know,
everybody go follow Alex and like all of this stuff right now.
My very abbreviated and spur of the moment takes on different sections of this are on my Twitter thing. So Yeah, the other point that I sort of tried to make here, and that Truth Initiative is kind of talking about some numbers about how popular vaping got, and these are one of the Truth Initiative is one of the organizations that frequently brings up this statistic about how like half or more than half of people who vape are also still smoking, or it's not that popular or something like that, failing to mention that since 2014, 2013, even before, let's just look at the entirety of tobacco control as a movement, as an institution. Tobacco control has been gunning for these products since at least 2009. I think actually this idea that FDA should be seizing products from overseas originated more in 2008. It's certainly been on everybody's, at least in tobacco control, it's been on their radar for a long time. And so those are the origins of the scare campaigns, using fear to try to motivate people to stay away from these products, ultimately using fear to keep people smoking, but also using fear to stigmatize people and try to encourage them to whatever.
Humanize people.
So yeah, dehumanizing people. But these organizations are prone to mention these things like dual use and so on, but don't at the same time acknowledge the influence that they've had on people's perceptions of risks of these products. And so 2014, I asked this to Twitter. The California Department of Public Health ran their lollipop campaign. Maybe it was 2015. I don't know. It was pretty early. Right around the time San Francisco banned vaping indoors. Also, thanks to the cannabis people for throwing nicotine under the bus. And Chicago, of course, did their whole vaping. They had a vaping truth campaign or vaping lies? I can't remember. It was vaping poison. They had these horrible billboards around Chicago. I remember a friend of ours that runs vape shops in Chicago had people coming in saying like, well, I was going to quit smoking, but there's this billboard down the street that told me this is all poison. So I'm not quite sure I trust you, what's going on here. And definitely discouraged a lot of adults from quitting smoking. And so not acknowledging that their own campaigns have discouraged people from trying these products and using them as a form of harm reduction. I also neglected to make a really good joke at the beginning, which I think it's a really good joke, but I'm probably wrong because now I've totally ruined it.
Please. I need to hear it now. Now is the time. Now is the most opportune moment.
I was going to say, a lot of this has to do with Truth Initiative's perception of us, of consumers, of adults. This paper, we are not actually, I don't believe we are the intended audience for this. People who smoke, people even us who are on the sort of pro-tobacco harm reduction side of this. This is something that is, it's 9 pages of text with 5 pages of references. This is something that was researched. I don't want to say well-researched, but, there's a lot of references there. And you can tell when the Truth Initiative is talking to you, regardless of your age, because they use puppets and cartoons.
That's what I was just going to say. This isn't something that we're going to see from puppets on a couch.
Yeah, no, this is that's the level of intelligence they believe that we have, and so that joke, I think, points to Truth Initiative's overall very paternalistic view of what tobacco harm reduction is. It needs to be tightly controlled. There are very specific circumstances under which someone can use it. I think they do kind of get in here about using like NRT for young people. And that being an option, but anyway, all that having been said, what I've written down here is Truth Initiative's thesis is moving on to something that I think we were getting into talking about. The tobacco industry should have no part in defining the parameters of a harm reduction approach, and their attempts to claim the mantle of harm reduction should be rejected by the public and policymakers. Now, of course, the industry is involved. Somebody has to make, market, and sell these products. But in the United States, industry has been prohibited from making claims about therapy or health benefits or anything like that since the beginning. It's not new. They've just this is the one thing that has always been under FDA's purview. And so our contention, of course, is that the industry actually needs to play a very significant role in this. They have the infrastructure, especially when we're talking about the incumbent cigarette companies that are going to get the first crack at the market. They need to deploy these products rapidly. They need to be featured prominently and compete head-to-head with sales of cigarettes. And small mom-and-pop vapor shop isn't going to be able to do that. So if we want to rapidly bring down the prevalence of smoking in our society, tobacco companies absolutely play a role in this. In terms of messaging, they are already restricted in what they can say. They have to go through FDA in order to make modified risk statements, and I hope they are. I would like to see some more movement in that specific space, but of course realizing that it is also a very daunting and expensive process in order to tell the truth about low-risk nicotine products. But again, getting back to the whole tone deafness of this nonsense, this statement ignores the lived experience of millions of people who have quit or significantly reduced their dependence on cigarettes and nicotine by using smoke-free alternatives like vapor products. Again, Truth Initiative is framing this as this, enduring conflict between profits and public health. This idea that a company can profit off of selling these low-risk nicotine products as a remedy to what many correctly identify as a problem that they created is just unacceptable to them, but ignores the fact that there's this the whole other half of the industry was built by people who just quit smoking by vaping and using other smoke-free products, and we are actually the ones who are setting this conversation about how these are low-risk products and they are safer alternatives to smoking. I realize I've just had this static picture up on screen for a while. Sorry.
I didn't know if you were going anywhere.
I know,
with it,
I wasn't
so I didn't want to touch it.
No, it's cool. Sorry. But I will offer sort of it's not really a counterpoint here, but I think this gets back into a bit of what we were talking about, the potential harm or risks to kids. We cannot ignore the potential of high nicotine content products to sustain nicotine dependence, and a variety of products in a range of nicotine strengths need to be available for people to make their own informed choices about nicotine consumption. And I will specifically talk about Juul here because we just had this boring documentary from New York Times last night, which I was thinking about this, and I did that thing where I typed out a bunch of tweets and just didn't send it.
I've done that.
But one of them was, when we think about Juul, and it's not limited to Juul, it's all of the copycats that came later. These products have one, maybe two speeds, and that speed is help people quit smoking. And in order to do that, the reason why these products are so successful is because they pretty much match the nicotine delivery of a cigarette. And that's important. It's very important for
switch to smoking.
What?
Switch to smoking. Juul did not want to try to help people to quit, which is one reason why they don't have a step down program. They were specifically to switch alternative.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
when you said quit, so I just
me.
wanted to be specific on that because that's some people are like, well, why didn't they do that? So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, this is mostly about how Juul is what it is. It's people switching away from smoking,
right?
And you got to meet them at that what they're accustomed to in nicotine content. And one of the things that I've been contemplating, I don't know the conversations that James and Adam had with each other. Should we offer these in a range of maybe if they had taken some cues from the independent side of the industry, we would see 3 or 4 different nicotine strengths. I know that once independent companies started making their own nicotine salt liquids, there was sort of a range. I was impressed to see 24, 25 milligram nicotine salt e-liquid. That. Because we knew what we went through. There are a lot of people out there who, yes, they don't want to consume nicotine anymore, but they have to have the options. And here's the real kicker, right? The 3 of us know that. We know that the step down option is very valuable to a lot of people. It's been valuable for us. I have certainly taken advantage of that. But the process to bring these products to market actually sort of demands that you submit applications for a limited number of products. And being able to afford, as we've talked before, all of those studies about the different nicotine strengths and different flavors and so on, millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I don't know. I guess my point in at least this section is just the same point over and over again. Truth Initiative is missing the point. There's a whole section of tobacco control that's missing the point here. The more that they bang away at how this all has to be done through FDA and the process is what it is and we can't change it, we can't lighten up the regulation, well, this is what you get. The product that you get is exactly what FDA described in 2016. Mm-hmm. It is a closed system, liquid device combination. That's the Juul. That's all the copycats that came after. And as we have seen, they are not sold in the same range of nicotine strengths that, as you pointed out, Kristin, offer people that step down option. Right. So,
without coercion, at their own pace, with respect to their autonomy. I do want to, I could be wrong here, and please, anybody who does know, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that, because here in the States, Juul does have two strengths. They have a 5% and a 3%, or at least they did. And my understanding is that there were other levels that stepped down further than that, but when the deeming regs dropped, they didn't pursue further.
I don't know anything about that.
That was my understanding, and I could be wrong, but they had already submitted whatever, registered with FDA, things like that, when the deeming regs happened, and then that froze the market, super effectively froze the market. And Juul tried to essentially play nice, follow the rules, do the things that they were supposed to do. And so we didn't get the rest of the strengths from there. And I don't know how many more there were or what the rest of those do. That was my understanding, though, was that in part is due to the deeming regs that we didn't see here in the States more than the 5 and the 3.
Yeah.
So I don't know if somebody out there does know more about that, please let me know, because I think that's really interesting, because if, that's kind of one of those catch-22 things where we could have seen a step down from Juul had FDA not essentially barred them from doing that. So,
and they couldn't, because that whole step down implies smoking cessation, and they are not a drug. They're not supposed to be a drug. They're supposed to be totobacco product. They're supposed to be something that
it could be the alternative for somebody who only smokes 5 cigarettes a day or something like that. That could be low. I mean, it could still very well just be an alternative offered in a range of options. But that was just, I just wanted to throw that in there because that was my understanding of it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it, but if I was a jumpy manufacturer and worried about getting, a cease and desist as making therapeutic claims, I might just avoid, because the whole argument back in the day was, we are not a smoking cessation product. We are an alternative to tobacco, something that people will use instead of tobacco. And that's what harm reduction is. But what they're saying is harm reduction is not allowed unless it's almost medicinal. Like here, the one part that I found here was, we don't have time, but heck, I could go over this thing forever. But this one line here, while the case of, because they're trying to compare tobacco harm reduction with other kind of drug harm reduction. It says, while in the case of a substance use disorder, harm reduction, if focused primarily on the health and well-being of the drug user, does not ignore the impact of public health. This one, for example, while medication-assisted therapy for substance use disorder is a sound harm reduction policy, no one advocates selling methadone as a consumer product to everyone in convenience stores nationwide. I mean, that's the tone I'm reading this in when I'm in my head. Instead, it's providing a medically supervised context to limit dangers of abuse and uptake by non-users. The thing that Truth Initiative here is missing from their spiels about harm reduction is if you were to actually talk to people very deeply ingrained in drug harm reduction, safe supply. And safe supply means the commercial option to go buy your drugs just like you go to the liquor store and you buy your bottle of booze that you know what is in that bottle of booze, and you go home and you can consume. It doesn't make the use of the drug inherently safe, but it means that drug is free of unknown impurities and unknown amounts. It makes that supply regulated and safer. That's what that safe supply argument is. So they're very knowingly skipping that point. They talk about safe consumption. They talk about needle exchange. They talk about ways to make, the illicit market safer without really revolutionizing actually making drug use safer. And they know that, and they glaze pat, they skip that part because that would turn their whole argument upside down. So they're trying to piggyback off of decades of actual harm reduction in this around the world. And it's honestly really gross. Like, it's really sick.
Yeah, and the other one that jumped out at me, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but the other one that jumped out on me real quick.
Because I got 5 minutes, and okay. I'm probably going to say this thing, and then I'll hand it back to you guys and catch this on the replay. But since we are on this specific point that you brought up, Kristin, the choice here that Truth Initiative is presenting the world with is we either use the regulations that we have in place, or it's just going to be sold in all the convenience stores. Those aren't the only two options. Right. We've seen this with cannabis. You have a dedicated cannabis dispensary, and I know, we just went through this whole thing about going to an adult-only store or whatever, but your options are not limited to getting your drugs administered by someone in a lab coat, or it's just all, free range drug supply everywhere next to the candy and the beverage.
Yeah, every 7-Eleven keeps their cocaine.
Like cigarettes are?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of that's the comparison they're trying to make, but it's really disingenuous here because there is a different retail model that does have, oversight and security in place where people are being ID'd, conversations about responsible use are being had, and people can feel confident that the products they're buying aren't going to kill them when they walk out the door. So I again, selling in C-stores is not the only retail environment, and I think Truth Initiative is being very disingenuous with this scenario here. I mean,
exactly. Even worse is that they should be sold in convenience stores because the cigarettes that the harm reduction for are sold in convenience stores. And they just passed T21 federally, and all these states are passing it. So you can't hold cigarettes to a lower standard and make them more available and say, well, T21 and everything works for cigarettes, but it's not going to work for these products. And that was my next thing that I was going to show, was essentially their whole section on youth use, and then throwing out all the numbers and still not coming, again, like we talked about earlier, where's the harm? All they can say is it's use, completely ignoring that a lot of these kids would be smoking if they weren't vaping. That's where the harm reduction comes in for even the youth. Do we want them to be doing that? No. Do we want them to be smoking? No. But this head in the sand idea that they're not going to do it if you turn it into a medicine, that's pretending that cigarettes aren't still out there.
Actually, it just reminded me of something that I really wanted to tell somebody the other day. One of the most absurd things I've seen in all of this is some people will remember, I guess it was a few years ago, when the FTC and the FDA teamed up and they went after companies for selling their products in packaging that resembled food or beverage.
Right.
One of the packages was, I think it was, I think I know it. It's like Scissor, it's the double cup. It's soda mixed with diverted codeine. Mm-hmm. I just want people to understand the everything that I just said. I want you all to put that together and say, And understand that the FTC sent an e-liquid company a warning letter about their product being packaged as a food or beverage, and that beverage was a party drink from the hood made with diverted prescription drugs.
Yes.
It was a red Solo cup.
No, it's like but maybe I don't know. I don't know how people do it. There's a whole scene about this drink, right?
Oh,
but whatever. And I'm not condemning anybody for doing it. Whatever, man. Just be safe. But it's it's right there in front of you.
At one point, I believe they referred to it as the lean.
The lean. That's it. The lean.
Got that purple drink.
So anyway, I'm sorry to be interrupting and all this stuff. I just wanted to make sure I got at least some of these points in. I got to bounce. Thank you guys. Thank you guys, everybody, for showing up. I'll just do my wave now and say I'll see you next week.
Bye, Alex. Excellent job.
Bye.
See ya.
I was just gonna the thing that I did when this came up. I mean, I just couldn't believe this whole thing. But here was my tweet on that, and essentially, do I have the right thing up now? Is my tweet up? Nope, you're still seeing the other one. How do you switch it to a different window?
What are you trying to do? You may want to just close that one out.
Yeah, I'm going to
share screen again and go through
like
whatever window you are trying to share.
Stop sharing. Start sharing.
Everybody right now, while Kristin's trying to find her thing, everybody go follow Alex on Twitter and go like his whole thread, because he told everybody that he wasn't trying to get followers. So go do it. Just go do it.
But this was the tweet that I put out on this. And if you can't read it, it says, here's Truth Initiative's statement on harm reduction that demonstrates that its leadership is just as clueless, elitist, and condescending as an intolerant Karen claiming she's a really good person, honestly, because her hairdresser is gay and her housekeeper is black. I mean, I'm gonna stop this now.
It's like the
tone deafness. I mean, they just don't get it. I mean, they don't understand that there's benefits from this, that not everybody who switches to harm reduction. And then they do later on say, well, we appreciate the fact that there's some people who don't want to quit nicotine. 30% of smokers say they have no intent of ever quitting. They always push the 70% number, that 70% say they want to quit. Well, how many actually do quit every year? And then they completely ignore that 30%, which is a good, it's a few million people. And
that figure, right? That 70% of people who smoke say they want to quit. How much of that is pressure through stigma?
Right.
How many people, I was for a long time, and I did at one point decide, okay, I get it. I do need to quit because I was feeling those health effects rapidly and very dramatically. But for a long time, I was like, yeah, sure, I want to quit. Yeah, I should quit smoking. I just said it because that's what people wanted to hear from you. I loved smoking. I loved smoking, and I'm not ashamed to admit that anymore. I don't feel that stigma anymore. But when I was smoking, it was always, oh yeah, I'll quit. I know I should quit. I'm gonna quit. Don't worry, I'll quit, because it's what people want to hear from you. So that 70% figure, I've always wondered, really, if people were honest. I know, what a concept. Honest.
Right.
What would that figure actually be? How many people who do smoke actually want to quit versus the number of people who realize they need to quit, do want to actually quit, and how many of those people are just saying it because we've stigmatized it, we've dehumanized them, we've told them how terrible of a human being they are for smoking,
And they use that. I mean, if you read that thing, that the language they use, that whole, the passive aggressiveness I felt from that first sentence, like Alex said, that they're we're rejecting the FDA stuff. I mean, they know for a fact that it works for very few people. They know that.
Yeah, it's got
for them to act like we're just rejecting it. And they completely, and if you look at that whole section on youth use, again, like we talked about earlier, There's no consideration into why are these kids choosing to do this. Nicotine is not immediately habit forming. You have to use it quite a bit before it actually becomes habit. But why are you going, something like 60 or almost 70, might be more, but I want to say it's around 70% of people have tried smoking in their lifetime.
Sure.
But we never get anywhere near the numbers, those numbers for people who.
No, the vast majority of people who pick up smoking at any time, maybe they try a few cigarettes when they're young, decide it's not for them. You get the occasional person who, I smoked once or twice when I went drinking with friends or whatever it may be. But the vast majority of people, like you said, never pick up a long-term habit.
Right. And so there's something that makes when that person tries it, that they go, oh, I want to do that again. And it's not getting high. They're not getting, okay, you've got that whole little buzz.
There's
thing.
a nicotine buzz. I think a lot of that stems from increased blood flow and heart rate and things like that come from nicotine.
And that's a short-term quick thing.
Very short.
It doesn't maintain. And once you get more into the cigarette, that goes away. And the more you get used to smoking, that goes away. But honestly, I don't think a lot of that is the nicotine. I think a lot of that is the carbon monoxide that's cutting off.
It's like when people talk about, when you smoke cannabis, hold your hit, it'll get you higher. No, that's actually just oxygen deprivation to your brain. There is no such thing as holding your breath. It'll get you higher. That's not a thing. It doesn't work that way. But yeah,
Logan's,
absolutely.
Tips for the day.
And I do want to point out really quick, I just want to clarify the whole, it takes a while, habit forming takes a while. There is no drug that follows the one hit and you're hooked propaganda BS that is out. It's not how substances work. It's not how the brain works. Whether it's dependence or full addiction, there is no drug that only takes one hit and you are fully addicted. That's also a huge myth, and it's just a really it's just not fact. It's just not how it works.
I like this comment. It says, remember the Lay's potato chip slogan, you can't eat just one. Well, yeah, they knew potatoes have nicotine.
I dare to challenge that. I bet you I can eat one Lay's potato chip.
Yeah, but so that whole section, they just talk about, addiction. This is all bad. It's addiction. And they don't even stop to look into why these kids and Skip's brought this up a lot. You brought that. We just talked about it earlier. They don't stop. They refuse to see any benefit to nicotine, and they refuse to see that sometimes that nicotine dependency can keep people from having dependencies on worse things or doing self-harm. I've told the story. Yeah. My daughter's given the permission to tell the story that she was self-harming, and the nicotine, a very low 3 milligram vape, stopped that. It gave her something else to do. It calmed her. She suffered from anxiety. She was on medication. She was getting therapy, but she was still self-harming. So the nicotine did give her a benefit in this case, and that's a very common thing for teens. That's what they completely ignore. It's like all they see is there's addiction. That's bad. You can't perpetuate addiction. That's bad. And it's not even addiction once you take the vast majority of the harm away, in my opinion. Then you've got coffee, which Matt Myers said once, if you take away all the harms.
It's the easy way out, though. When we really get down into the kinds of things that would truly benefit our youth, we're talking about systemic problems in our society. We're talking about massive changes, and a lot of times, these groups just see that all of that is unrealistic, it's unattainable, it's unachievable. So what we can do is vilify the people who do this thing, make it illegal, imprisonment, whether imprisonment or death. Those seem to be more attainable outcomes than actual systemic real change.
Right. Yeah, and then they go on to say, they pull out that 70% of current adult smokers want to quit, and that most youth and young adult vapors basically also say they want to quit. And that's funny because I've seen a lot of people say that quitting vaping was pretty easy once they got it down to a certain level.
Actually, one of my favorite things is when groups like Truth, they do these commercials and whatnot, or you see the videos and they interview teenagers that talk about how heavily dependent they were on these products. And then when they interview them, they're like, yeah, so I was really dependent. I couldn't go 2 hours without vaping. But then I decided one day that it was terrible for me, so I quit. And then I'm like, so wait,
Yeah.
You just told me that you couldn't go 2 hours without it. But when you found out how terrible it was, you quit.
Yeah. Because they say the nature of nicotine as a drug is incompatible with the unregulated approach. Okay, and here's what why is this bad? Why is this bad? In the United States, 70% of current adult smokers want to quit. Recent research shows that most youth and adult e-cigarette users surveyed also want to quit. Nicotine, however, is particularly hard to give up because it leads to physical dependence and withdrawal. So does coffee. I mean, caffeine does the same thing. And
admittedly, I am a heavy caffeine user. I use somewhere in the mix of 700 to 1,000 milligrams of caffeine a day. And when I do not have caffeine, I definitely experience caffeine withdrawal. That is a very real thing.
Oh yeah, I get headaches if I don't get my coffee.
Yeah, I get severe headaches without caffeine. So yeah, but does my caffeine dependence really inhibit my life in any major way? No, it actually keeps me going pretty well to provide for my family. So there's a lot of benefit to it. I would,
when you're rolling in the mud,
like to maybe use less, but I'm not in a great deal of harm using caffeine. My sleep schedule, I guess, could be a little bit better, but
doing.
Sure. And there were worse things that I was doing. I used to be a heavy methamphetamine and cocaine user. So yeah, I've definitely mitigated a lot of my harm, but a lot of people point to my caffeine use to be like, oh, that's no good for you either. And my response is something I'm not going to say on our stream usually.
So the last sentence in that paragraph was moreover, and here's this is the worst thing that they can come up to say. Why is this so horrible that if it's unregulated? Because nicotine, because you can get addicted. But the next sentence is moreover, young people are particularly vulnerable to nicotine addiction. Nearly 9 out of 10 adults who smoke cigarettes daily first try smoking by age 18, and 99% first try smoking by age 26. So what that's basically saying to the layperson who's not really tuned into this double speak and these weasel words is, oh, well, they tried smoking and now they're addicted. That's what it basically says, is that they're not. How are they more vulnerable? Yeah, they all start at that point, but that's a very stressful time of life for kids, and they're trying a lot of stuff at that time, and still out of all the kids who did try it, most of them don't end up becoming addicted. So what does that say? Those kids went back for a reason. And the next sentence or the next paragraph is the thing that also gets me. It says the market for cigarettes has historically depended on a strategy of hooking young users and developing them into lifelong addicted users who then become heavy users and generate profits on volume. In fact, a significant majority of nicotine is purchased to stave off the unpleasant effects of nicotine withdrawal by users who wish they had never started in the first place. So most of you, nicotine wasn't bringing you any benefits, despite the fact that they know that. You see all these studies coming out linked to eating disorders, linked to ADHD, linked to autism, linked to mental health, linked to being LGBT, linked to
correlation is not causation.
Yeah, and then linked to Snapchat. That's the most recent one. But they have all these studies showing these links, and none of them. You want to
know if there's any link between nicotine, vaping, and Snapchat? That's where we're purchasing it.
That's what kids are.
If there's a link there, it's because we have torn down the legal regulated industry. And guess where our young people get these from?
Yeah.
And that's always been the issue, though. That's always been the issue for where young people attain these products. It's social media sales. It's No age verification, no ID check, no
Right.
safety, no anything involved.
But they're basically saying that that we only want the nicotine because we're just trying not to have the withdrawal symptoms. And they have all these studies that it's almost like watching cops from different jurisdictions finding murders that look weirdly the same, and none of them are talking to each other to know that they've got a serial killer. You know, they have all these studies that say, look, you know, you got all these people with these conditions and they're smoking and now vaping, and they never go, okay, well, maybe they're getting some benefit from it, you know, and no, they just suddenly decided that they're just going to keep smoking. I mean, that they're going to make one thing more worse in their life that they have to deal with. I mean, it makes no sense. But the final thing it said was that the current U.S. experience suggested that the unregulated e-cigarette market will follow a similar trajectory, with innovation concentrating on increasing addiction liability and product appeal. And they're essentially saying that that's what the market's only going to be doing that, just going. I can't find the actual sentence, but there's a sentence in there that popped out at me earlier where they said that essentially, now I lost my train of thought, but it was essentially that
the market doesn't. The market just wants to sustain nicotine dependence.
Oh, that's what. Thank you. That this market, that the entire e-cigarette market, instead of going after people who smoke and trying to reduce their harm, decided to just go after youth and make new customers and make new victims, basically, which makes no sense because there's far more people currently smoking and they're a lot easier to target, and they usually have more money than teens do, you know, because supposedly price is going to affect teens so easily. It's just
well, that's why we tax everything.
Right. Exactly my point. So that's a horrible business proposition. I mean, that's the worst market to go after, you know, and it gets you in trouble. But they made it seem like that's what the entirety of the, and granted, there were some people, but I don't think I ever really saw people going after teens. They were going after young adults to be hip and cool, and hey, let's get them to do this instead of starting to smoke, because that is a high smoking age if you think about it. But the big problem was there were retailers who didn't have a problem who they sold to.
It feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When you have an organization that fights so hard to shut down the independent vapor industry, which offers a step-down program, multiple, you know, nic levels, this whole entire process that people can go through to ultimately, if they choose to, quit using nicotine completely. When we shut that down, then we go, look, the only thing that's left is all this high nicotine stuff, and look, they just want to keep everybody dependent. Well, there was an entire industry doing the exact opposite of that, and you shut that and vilified it down too. So,
yeah. And again, cigarettes are still there.
Yeah, and that's a great point. They do recommend for people who are schizophrenic to not stop smoking.
Yeah.
I mean, to a degree, right? They
that was a comment.
Everybody to stop smoking, but they don't want people to go through dramatic, you know, episodes and things like that as well.
Right. So. Yeah. So I mean, if you're feeling particularly masochistic, go read the article. But you know, it's just the idea that they're trying to tell people what harm reduction should be, and just getting it so
I don't think
wrong.
truth has any place, even uttering the words harm reduction. I think that's it's egregious and it's appalling. And they don't understand it. They don't understand the philosophy or the practices behind it. They don't understand the social implications of harm reduction and what it truly is, because it is not just a safer product. Harm reduction is a philosophy. Harm reduction is a movement of people to have safety and respect and autonomy and dignity, which is something that Truth Initiative I don't think knows very much about. So it just the whole truth thing and their arguments around harm reduction, I think is just gross. That's the only word that comes to mind. It's just stop.
Yeah, and this idea that the market, the manufacturers who created the problem shouldn't be helping to solve the problem seems completely backwards to any other industry you think about.
Yeah.
They want
cars should never have been made safer.
Electricity should never be cleaner.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And this whole idea that if you take away these products, life will be happy. The kids will start doing yoga and getting their homework done and, eating kale. It just completely ignores, again, the why, the why people choose to use substances, and they can't get their head wrapped around. I mean, I saw this on Twitter the other day. Oh, it's, they like the taste. I think it's disgusting, but I understand that some of you smokers like the taste. And that was a guy who was being friendly to vaping. So they still don't. There just is not an understanding that we are finding a benefit from this. We found something that, unlike the other 90% of the people who have tried smoking, didn't find anything from it. We took that first bit and went, yeah, I feel better. I'm coughing my lung up, but my brain feels better.
Yeah.
And that's still what is happening for us. So I mean, we need to keep in mind that those problems are not going to go away. And I often see even vapors saying, well, this is only for people who smoke. This is not for teens, which is true. Nothing's for teens. That's why they do it all behind our backs. They're going to do it anyway. It's not intended for teens, but to say that it's only intended for people who currently smoke is not harm reduction, because you have to stop the people from taking that first step.
Society as a whole. Yeah,
but I'm just saying that
you're also talking about harm prevention.
Right, prevention. Yeah, and that's going to reduce the harm. So you can't say, and I understand there's a bad optics of saying, teens should be doing this too instead of smoking. But teens should be doing this instead of smoking. We don't want them to do anything, but it's just kind of along the line.
Right, like that's the thing, right? Like that's the dilemma is we're not out here saying like teens should vape. No, that's right. No, like, but teens shouldn't smoke. Like
right.
There's a very fine line there between people taking that as you promoting teen use and you being a very realistic person and saying, look, if a teenager is going to do one of two things, would you prefer them to do the less harmful thing or the very harmful thing if the option of them doing no thing is not available? And if it's only A or B, there is no option C.
Right.
Most people will try to make string arguments around it. No, the real situation is there is a percentage of teenagers who are going to use these products. Would you prefer them to use very available, extremely harmful products, or products that we've made very hard to get, that are a fraction, a very small fraction of the harm that comes from things. So people take that as like you're a shill. You want to kill all the teenagers. Like I wore my awesome dad shirt today.
Well, the thing is that they're not going to address the why of why teens do this. If they're going to still hide their heads in the sand and say, well, it's just because they tried it once and now they're hooked, which is a joke. But that's what they're essentially saying. There's no in there. If you look at their entire narrative, if you look at it closely, their entire narrative is these teens only got addicted because they tried it. I mean, that's really it. They didn't find any benefit. That's the only reason that you can think of why they actually started using it regularly, was because they immediately got addicted. So if you're going to go by that track and ignore the fact that there's a reason why, then you can't. If you don't fix that why, there's going to always be people lined up behind the rest of us who haven't started yet, who are going to try experimenting with stuff because of that why. And if we just say, well, no, you have to get hooked first, then we'll help you.
Harm reduction
and that makes no sense,
because we understand that the why, the real things that would change and benefit people, our society chooses not to do. Poverty is a really good example for why people use substances. We're not going to end poverty because A, we choose not to, and regardless of your political affiliation, whatever, we choose not to. As a society, we very well could end poverty. We choose not to. It's very beneficial to certain groups and corporations, things like this, whatever, but we choose not to. So harm reduction comes in and says, okay, look, this is unattainable. This isn't going to happen, at least yet. In the meantime, or until we get to that point, we need to realize that people are going to do these things for whatever reasons they have. And we need to keep people alive. We need to respect their autonomy. We need to understand that these big systemic changes and things like this aren't attainable right now. Instead of throwing people under the bus and letting people die, harm reduction comes in and just tries to keep people alive, respect their autonomy, treat them with compassion and dignity, respect them as human beings, and acknowledge that.
Yeah, and
Truth Initiative, I don't think understands any of that. So for them calling out and saying that tobacco companies and things like this have no place in harm reduction, I don't think Truth Initiative has any place in harm reduction.
Right.
You know,
and I totally agree. And I imagine that the people who work at Truth are probably wanting to be helpful. They probably lean a little left, and they probably would think, well, sex ed is a good thing and condoms are a good thing and stuff. And probably, I remember back in the day, the kind of the right, and they still kind of argue this, but it's not as bad as it used to be. But, you can't give kids sex education and you can't give them condoms and you can't give them birth control because then they're just going to have more sex, and this delusion that if you keep all these safer things from them, they're just not going to do it. Yeah, and that's the exact same attitude that Truth is taking of if we just don't let teens have this, they're just not going to do it.
Well, if we get rid of it,
Yeah, and it's this delusion, but they can't see that disconnect, and it's crazy. So I did see just one comment. I think I'm done ranting on this. I mean, I could go for an hour if you guys let me, but somebody made a comment that, and I can't find it now. I apologize. But they said this is why tobacco and vaping products need to have separate categories, or they need to be regulated separately. And this is kind of off topic, but we've addressed this in the past, and I think we've written about it too. But just for the sake of people who haven't seen our past shows, go back and watch all 500 hours of it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, ideally that would have been nice. And if you go and read our timeline, you'll see how we got here as far as being a tobacco product, because the FDA was trying to call vapor products unapproved drug treatments for smoking cessation. Okay. And the argument, and they would have been immediately banned. Every single product, we would not have anybody who's vaping today because of this, if this is what had happened, if they had gotten their way. Now, maybe somebody might have come up with some kind of medical version of it, but who knows? But we would not be having these discussions on tobacco harm reduction. We would not be in this position right now. So what happened was a company, CASAA, there was another one before that, but CASAA took it over, argued, look, we're not trying to help people quit smoking. We're trying to give them something to smoke instead. So that makes us more of like an alternative to tobacco.
We basically had two options. This was either going to be a tobacco product or it was going to be a drug system.
Unapproved drug.
Right.
And so they said, we're not trying to get people to quit. We're just people who won't. Our target is people who aren't going to quit. And so they won the case. But the judge in that case suggested, he didn't rule, but he suggested to the FDA, well, you know what? This Tobacco Act just passed and you can deem them a tobacco product, and then you can regulate them that way, which is what the FDA.
Fast forward 7 years later.
Here we are today. Now, a lot of people made the argument even back then when we were saying, yeah, we need to support this tobacco thing. Otherwise, these are all gone. A lot of people argued, well, we should be something else. We should be something else. We're not a tobacco product. We're not a drug. We should be something else. And we said, we don't disagree with that. But one, they're not giving us that option, that they'd have to create a whole new category, which the FDA, that was to their discretion to want to do that. And they chose not to. But even if they had, one advantage that the tobacco designation gave was technically they can't ban it. They can't require it to go down to 0 nicotine. They can't just ban any products for no reason. People are calling this a ban right now, but what it really is they're denying applications, because the product itself is technically not legal because it hasn't gotten approval. So there's a small distinction there. But even if we had imagine that the FDA, who's acting like this to vaping now, imagine if they just created a whole new category for vaping and can write any rules they want. Anything.
It could potentially be even worse.
And it probably would have been, in all honesty. So having that separate category, in an ideal world where it's a separate category and they're not so tough on us like they are with the tobacco rules, but based on how they're acting and the pressure that things like Truth and Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and all that kind of stuff are putting onto the FDA right now, it probably wouldn't have put us in any better situation.
No, they still would. I mean, prior to, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids really picking up the mantle against vaping and e-cigarettes, they were set up to go after nicotine gum.
Yeah.
And things like that. Like,
they oppose flavors.
Regardless
like
of what product category all of this had fallen into, it would have been the same pressure. It still would have been the same, propaganda and everything else. So, yeah. Kristin, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. We're basically right at the 2-hour mark.
I saw that too.
Yeah, so I think this is a good time to wrap it up. I think we've had a lovely discussion today. Unfortunately, we lost Alex a little while ago, but I hope that he's off doing whatever he needed to do and staying safe doing it. He didn't tell anybody what he was doing. He's like, I have to leave at 6, so that could be literally anything.
But
thank you to everybody out there. Thank you to everybody still here tuned in with us. We appreciate all of you. For podcast listeners, because we did have a legislative rundown today, there will be 2 versions available of this podcast, available on SoundCloud, Apple, wherever you tune into your podcast. There will be a full version and then just a short, condensed legislative rundown, need to know kind of situation that you can tune into as well. As a reminder, Kristin, could you post that tax CTA for us again in chat, just to make sure everybody's got it one last time? Please, if you have not done the call to action about this tax, please fill it out and please share it literally everywhere. I know I say it all the time, like send it to random phone numbers, but like if you have to, I'm not opposed. Send it out, share it all over social media, tell your friends, ask your friends and family members. My mom is a non-nicotine user, period. She doesn't use any nicotine at all. She smoked briefly when she was younger, but she quit decades ago. I will send her our calls to action, and she very happily fills them out and does them. So it doesn't have to be just your vape buddies or people within your group. Like, ask your friends and family that care about you to also participate in these things, because the more, the better. You don't have to be a cloud chasing vapor to fill out a call to action. So please share it around. And I think, other than just joining CASAA, I hope literally everyone here, if you're tuned in right now and you are not a CASAA member, for shame. No, I'm not going to shame you. But for real, please join CASAA. It's absolutely free. You can get all of our newsletters, the calls to action, sign up for emails, all the stuff. And if you have not yet submitted your testimony to how you quit smoking, what safer alternatives you may have used or may not have used, please submit those testimonies to CASAA. We have 13,000-ish,
somewhere around there,
in that 13,000 number, but we need millions, literally millions. So please submit your testimonies. Kristin, do you have any final thoughts for everybody today?
Join your CASAA Facebook group.
Yes.
Make sure
I always forget the Facebook group in my little spiel.
Every state has a Facebook group, and DC and Puerto Rico, so please join it. That's where I will post stuff that's going on locally, and we also post other things here. We've got a hardworking moderation team that volunteers that just keep up on this stuff as best they can, and definitely do the call to action, and definitely join. I mean, it's so important. People say, well, why isn't CASAA doing this, or why isn't CASAA doing that? We need the numbers. Our influence is stronger being able to say, hey, we've got 1 million members. Right now we can say we've got 250,000 members. 1 million would be much better. That gives us some street cred, for lack of a better word, some influence. And then it gives us more people to be doing these calls to action. And so that's what we need. But just always remember that you are CASAA. Alex and I are employees. There's just 2 of us. The board is volunteer. They do a lot of work. Here's Logan on his day off doing this with us.
No, I work today.
Well, okay. Danielle doing the website and all that other kind of stuff. That's just the admin. We're just like the admins. You guys are CASAA. What our whole work is to give a voice to vapors, and you guys are the vapors. So use that voice and use these tools. Get other people to join. Have them add their voice, because the more voices we have, we've got, what did he say? 9,000 people have sent to the call to action. That should be 25,000. If we're going to really make an impact. So share that thing. Get people to join. Put it on your Facebook. Put it on your Twitter. Every single Facebook group with mods and juice and all that kind of stuff. We're not effective unless we have you guys out there doing what you need to do too, because you are CASAA. And thank you so much for coming and listening to us to rant every week. And I hope you learn a little bit of stuff, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, that'll do it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Same time, same place next Saturday. 1:30 over on the West Coast, 4:30 over on the Best Coast, Danielle. And that's going to do it
in the
for
middle.
us. Yeah, I can't do time zones anywhere else. I don't know. Arizona never changes, I guess. I can't figure Arizona out. I've got a few friends out there. I never know what time it is. I'm just like, is the sun up or is the sun down? That's all I need to know. Other than that, everybody stay safe. We will hopefully see you next week. And please, please, please do not forget to do that call to action. Go do it right now if you haven't done it, or go do it again. The second this ends, go do it. Do the call to action.
Do it
see you next
right
week.
now.